She looked like sunlight in human form. Every laugh, every wink, every bounce of golden hair sold the dream of joy. But behind the giggle, something darker waited. Goldie Hawn wasn't just a Hollywood sweetheart. She was a woman quietly fighting to stay alive inside her own smile. On camera, she was the carefree hippie girl from Laugh-In, the woman who made sadness look impossible. Off camera, she suffered panic attacks so severe she sometimes couldn't leave her house. Her fame came overnight, and so did the fear that she couldn't handle it. Why would one of the happiest women in America wake up crying every morning? Stay to the end, because Goldie's story isn't about laughter, it's about survival disguised as joy. Goldie Jean Hawn was born on November 21st, 1945, in Washington, D.C. Her parents ran a small music and dance business. Her mother, Laura, owned a dance school, while her father, Edward, played the piano and dreamed of jazz clubs. From the age of 3, Goldie was learning ballet steps before she could spell her own name. She was that kind of child, restless, observant, a natural performer. But her home wasn't just filled with music. It was filled with pressure. Her mother demanded discipline. Her father expected perfection. And little Goldie learned early that performance brought peace. When she danced, people stopped fighting. When she smiled, the room softened. That's where the mask began. By her teenage years, she was teaching dance herself. In the early 1960s, she left for New York City, chasing a dancer's dream that paid almost nothing. She lived in tiny rooms, ate canned soup for days, and auditioned endlessly. She later admitted she often cried alone in her apartment, terrified of failure, but more terrified of being ordinary. The irony. Her anxious mind kept her awake at night, rehearsing imaginary disasters. Yet that same sensitivity would one day make her irresistible to audiences, a woman who seemed fragile but fearless, awkward but radiant. Then came the audition that changed everything. It was 1968. NBC was creating a new comedy variety show, Rowan and Martin's Laugh-In. Goldie almost didn't go. She was a dancer, not a comedian. But when the producers asked her to improvise, she giggled through her lines, stumbling, mispronouncing, laughing at herself. They loved it. That genuine awkwardness became her brand. Within weeks, America was hooked. The country was reeling from assassinations, protests, and war. And here was this blonde burst of innocence, a reminder of something lighter. Viewers didn't just watch Goldie, they needed her. But with fame came an invisible price. The show painted her as the silly, airheaded blonde, a comic ornament between punchlines. In truth, she was deeply intelligent, reading Freud and Rumi between tapings. The dissonance tore at her. "They wanted me to be the joke," she once said, "but I knew I wasn't." Each night, after filming, she'd go home, close the door, and cry from exhaustion. Her body trembled. Her hands sometimes shook before live segments. She didn't know it then, but those were symptoms of severe anxiety. Doctors called it nerves. She called it fear. Then Hollywood called. In 1969, she starred in Cactus Flower alongside Walter Matthau and Ingrid Bergman. The movie exploded. Goldie's natural warmth outshined her co-stars, and at just 24, she won the Academy Award for Best Supporting Actress. The world crowned her a star, but instead of joy, she felt terror. She later confessed that when her name was announced, she didn't even attend the ceremony. She was at home, too afraid to face the cameras. The next morning, reporters asked how it felt to be Hollywood's new it girl. She smiled and said, "Wonderful." Inside, she was falling apart. The early 1970s made her unstoppable. There's a Girl in My Soup, 1970. Butterflies Are Free, 1972. Shampoo, 1975. But every role built the same image. Cute, dizzy, lovable. She wanted to be seen as serious, but the industry wanted a fantasy. "They told me not to think too much," she recalled. "They said audiences like me better when I giggle." The studio executives, almost all men, saw her as a brand, not a person. Her face was her contract. She once arrived at a meeting without makeup and was told to come back when the real Goldie shows up. She laughed at the insult, but it haunted her for years. Behind the laughter, the anxiety worsened. In her late 20s, she began experiencing panic attacks so intense she thought she was having heart failure. During one episode in 1973, she reportedly collapsed in her dressing room before filming, shaking uncontrollably. A doctor prescribed tranquilizers. They dulled the symptoms but not the pain. She later said, "I'd laugh on camera, then cry in the car." Few people knew that even during her biggest successes, she often begged friends to stay overnight so she wouldn't be alone with her thoughts. By the mid-70s, her personal life mirrored the chaos. In 1976, she married musician Bill Hudson of the Hudson Brothers. To the public, it was a golden romance. The bubbly actress and the charming rock star. To Goldie, it was another performance. The marriage quickly fell apart under the strain of her fame and his jealousy. They had 2 children, Oliver, born in 1976, and Kate, born in 1979. But happiness was fleeting. She once told a friend, "I wanted a family more than I wanted a husband." Bill accused her of emotional distance. She accused him of betrayal. When they divorced in 1980, tabloids labeled her a runaway wife. The reality was simpler. She was exhausted, lonely, and still fighting panic every day. Her children became her anchor and her guilt. In interviews, decades later, Oliver and Kate Hudson would describe a complicated childhood. They adored their mother but felt the sting of her absences. Hollywood, once her dream, had become her rival. Yet even amid family turmoil, Goldie's career refused to fade. In 1980, she starred in Private Benjamin, the story of a pampered widow who joins the army and finds her strength. It was Goldie's idea from the start, her rebellion against typecasting. The film was a hit, earning her another Oscar nomination and proving she could lead more than comedy. Ironically, it mirrored her life, a woman rebuilding herself after collapse. Then fate intervened again. In 1983, on the set of Swing Shift, she met Kurt Russell. He was rugged, grounded, and uninterested in Hollywood pretense. Their chemistry was instant. They moved in together soon after, merging families with honesty instead of vows. When asked why they never married, Goldie said, "A piece of paper won't make it better. Love does that." They faced criticism, skepticism, and tabloids predicting failure. Yet decades later, they remain one of Hollywood's longest partnerships, perhaps because they never pretended it was perfect. He steadied her when the panic returned. She made him believe in magic again. Still, the 80s weren't all bliss. Goldie's fame began to shift. She was still radiant, starring in Overboard 1987 and Bird on a Wire 1990. But Hollywood's obsession with youth was closing in. Studios began offering her motherly roles, the fate of every aging actress. Goldie refused to disappear quietly. She founded her own production company, using it to champion stories about women rediscovering themselves. She also started exploring mindfulness and Eastern spirituality, turning pain into purpose. In a 1989 interview, she said, "Happiness isn't a constant state, it's a practice." Few realized she was describing her therapy, long hours learning to breathe through anxiety attacks, sometimes minutes before walking on stage. By the early 1990s, she faced a new battle: invisibility. Hollywood's love affair with her had cooled. Younger stars replaced her. Scripts stopped arriving. She turned down roles that mocked aging women, saying, "I won't play bitterness." But rejection cut deep. Friends recall that she retreated to her home in the mountains of British Columbia, disappearing for months. Kurt protected her privacy, shielding her from tabloids that called her washed up. What no one saw was her reinvention. She read psychology, studied neuroscience, and began forming what would later become the Hawn Foundation. She wanted to understand why her own mind betrayed her and how she could stop it from defining her life. In 2003, she launched Mind Up, a program teaching mindfulness and emotional regulation to children. "If I had known how to calm my mind," she said, "my life would have been different." Through it, she transformed her lifelong anxiety into a mission. While other stars chased comebacks, Goldie chased peace. Yet the irony remained. The world missed the laugh. Every public appearance came with one question: when will she return to acting? Her answer was simple: when I miss it. It took nearly 15 years for that moment to come. In 2017, she appeared alongside Amy Schumer in Snatched. The film was uneven, but her presence was electric, a reminder that true charisma doesn't age. She laughed, danced, and showed a new kind of confidence. But those who knew her best noticed something different. The smile no longer looked like armor. She had made peace with the woman she'd spent decades pretending to be. She once said, "You can't always be the sunshine, but you can be the light for someone else." That sentence became her mantra, a quiet acknowledgement of the cost of always pretending to glow. The tragedy of Goldie Hawn's story isn't defined by scandal or downfall. It's quieter, more human. It's the story of a woman who became the face of happiness while privately battling fear. Of a performer who gave the world laughter while searching for her own calm. Her legacy isn't just cinematic, it's psychological. She redefined what resilience looks like. Not perfection, but persistence. Even now, when she speaks publicly about mental health, she doesn't sugarcoat it. "I still have anxiety," she says. "It never leaves, but I know how to meet it." Look closely at her later interviews. The warmth, the pauses, the honesty. You see not a Hollywood mask, but a survivor. She still dances, still meditates, still walks beside Kurt, both silver-haired and smiling. The little girl who learned to dance through fear never stopped moving, she just learned new steps. Her story reminds us that joy isn't the absence of pain, it's the triumph of grace over it. So when you see her laughing in old film clips, remember that laughter came at a cost. But as the years passed, the meaning of that laughter changed. It softened, deepened, it became the sound of someone who had survived herself. By her 70s, Goldie Hawn wasn't the bubbly blonde Hollywood once packaged. She was a woman who had learned to make peace with her mind. Life with Kurt Russell had become her sanctuary. They never married, yet outlasted nearly every Hollywood union. "We didn't stay because it was easy," Kurt once said. "We stayed because we chose to." Their bond thrived on honesty, laughter, and distance from the spotlight. Together they built the quiet life she'd always craved: mountain mornings, family dinners, and no need to perform. Her children grew into her reflection. Kate Hudson calls her a light, but one earned through pain. Their bond wasn't instant. It evolved after years of misunderstandings and absence. Today they meditate together and share the same calm defiance toward fame. "She taught me to choose joy," Kate says, a lesson Goldie had to teach herself first. Through her Hawn Foundation, she redirected her fame toward healing. Mind Up, her mindfulness program, reached classrooms across the world, teaching children how to breathe through anxiety, the very skill she once begged for. "If I had known how to calm my mind," she said, "my life would have been different." For the first time, she wasn't chasing applause. She was giving peace. She also began to speak about aging with rare grace. "I earned this face," she told an interviewer. "Every line is a story I survived." That quiet defiance inspired younger actresses who saw in her a map of longevity without compromise. What kept her radiant wasn't youth, it was forgiveness. By then, Goldie had made peace with her contradictions. She still danced, still laughed, but without the weight of pretending. When asked how she stayed happy, she said, "I don't stay happy, I return to it." The woman who once cried in dressing rooms now taught others how to breathe through panic, how to find calm in imperfection. So when you see her laughing in old film clips, remember, that laughter came at a cost. Behind the charm was courage, behind the sparkle was struggle, and behind every moment of joy was the quiet work of a woman determined not to drown in her own legend. That's the real Goldie Hawn, the woman who turned fear into faith, who built her light out of shadow, and who proved that even the brightest sunshine comes from surviving the storm. If stories like this remind you that even icons bleed, stay with us. There are more hidden lives, more legends who carried light through the dark, waiting to be seen beyond the spotlight.